CD 1, Track 14. 1.
My favourite fictional character has to be Philip Marlowe, the detective created by Raymond Chandler. The most famous book and movie in which he appears is, of course, The Big Sleep, with Humphrey Bogart playing Philip Marlowe. Once you've seen Humphrey Bogart, of course, it's very difficult to imagine Philip Marlowe as being anybody else other than Humphrey Bogart, because like Humphrey Bogart, Philip Marlowe is tall, good-looking, tough, very smart, and a smooth talker. And I suppose those are also the characteristics that I do like about Philip Marlowe. The thing about Philip Marlowe is, unlike most modern characters, he doesn't always say the right thing, although he always has a clever retort, and he doesn't always win. Philip Marlowe is not always on top of the situation. Philip Marlowe sounds like a real guy with real problems, who's very clever, very tough, and likes to get to the bottom of the problem. The sort of problems that he has to overcome, of course, as a detective in Los Angeles, is generally solving murder crimes. But he's often not so much interested in who did it as to why or how. By the end of the story, you care as much about the victim as perhaps the murderer or Philip Marlowe himself. This is actually one reason why you can reread and reread the Raymond Chandler novels with Philip Marlowe in them, because it's not what happens in the story, it's how Philip Marlowe deals with the problems that matters.
2.
I think my favourite fictional character has to be the lead character, the heroine, if you like, of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. She's absolutely, I think, one of the best drawn characters in English literature. She is, of course, Elizabeth Bennet. She's the heroine, she's sparky, she's lively, she's feisty. And when you think that this is a book that's set in the 1800s, it's really quite remarkable that you've got such a modern woman as the heroine. I mean, she's lippy, she talks back to all these men who are older than her and in more authority than her. Fantastic. I think it's character traits that I'd really quite like to have myself. I imagine her, and I think I'm quite influenced here by the films and so on that have been made of Pride and Prejudice, as being quite tall with a very lively, mobile face and possibly dark hair as well. Memorable things that she does. Well, the thing that I really like about her from the story of Pride and Prejudice is the way that she takes control of her own life in a period of history where women really had very little power and very little control over what happened to them in the marriage market. And I think it's great that she sort of comes to a self-realisation through the events in the novel and decides to do the right thing and go for the guy that she really loves. And of course she meets lots of problems along the way. People who think she's socially unacceptable, or people who have very prejudiced views about class and society. And of course she succeeds and she wins the day, wins her guy in the end.
3.
I think my favourite fictional character was the old man from The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. I still have quite a strong visual image of this man. The whole story takes place in a boat off the coast of Cuba with just this one character mostly. I imagine him to be quite old. He was a lifelong fisherman. He had quite a tough life. So I imagine he had these really big, strong hands that were cut and bruised from hauling in nets his whole life, every night out on the sea. Imagine him with a little bit of grey hair, just old and wise. Somebody who had been a fisherman his whole life, took a lot of pride in it and tried to do it as best he could. And he was down on his luck in the story. He hadn't caught anything for quite a long time. But he still dragged himself out every night and cast his nets and hoped that he would catch something. In a way, he sort of reminds me of my dad. Somebody who had limited opportunities in life, but found a job that he could do and did it to the best of his ability, even though there was very little glamour attached to it. And I think this, in a way, was what the fisherman was like. He was a fisherman and he took pride in that and did the best job he could.